Are we good to go, Peter? All right, we are live. Thank you so much for joining us. We are sorry that we have a little bit of technical difficulty getting started, but we are here now and we are so glad that you're with us. So welcome to February's Chat and Learn. I am your host, Dr. Danielle Barrett, Education and Training Specialist at the Institute of Child Nutrition. I am joined today by my co-host, Patrick Butler, who is also an Education and Training Specialist. Before we introduce our guests today and our topic, I want to go over just the general housekeeping to get us started. So first off, welcome to all of our new friends joining us for the first time and our returning friends. We are so excited that you decided to spend some time to chat with us today. So for all of you that are new, our monthly chat and learns are meant to be informal, fun conversations that help us connect the ICN staff to those out in the field doing the work. We want these to be fun learning opportunities where we're actually able to empower, educate, and elevate the leadership discussion by having these peer-to-peer conversations that promote active learning and help us just be able to learn in a little bit different approach than the typical set, very structured trainings. And so we hope that you use these for your own professional development. We want to be able to have conversations that matter to you, cover topics. So anytime you would like to share, we have an open chat. So as you know, we are streamed live on our website, theicn.org/leadership, as well as our various social media platforms. But while we're live today, if you have any questions, please use that chat box that's on our website because that's what we're checking and we'll be able to answer your questions live. But also, if you have topics you want us to cover for future chat and learns, please send them our way as well. And so today we will be continuing our HR focus series, talking about the interview process.
Good afternoon. As Danielle mentioned, my name is Patrick Butler. I'm an Education and Training Specialist here at the Institute of Child Nutrition. It is my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Casey Dickinson, Assistant Director of Food and Nutrition Services for Chesterfield County Public Schools in Virginia. Welcome, Casey. We're excited to have you with us today. If you want to share a little about yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here today to discuss the topic. As Patrick said, my name is Casey Dickinson. I'm from Chesterfield County Public Schools. In Chesterfield County, we have 67 schools in our district and about just over 60,000 students. So a relatively large school division. My experience, I come from state agency. I've worked with the federal agencies, and now here I am in local. So that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
We are so glad that you're here with us today. And so the great news is we got so many great questions. Y'all are really on it this month. Unfortunately, that also means we're not going to be able to talk them all live because, again, y'all are just with it. So we would like to make sure that we do answer those. So stay tuned because we are thinking of ways that we can continue the conversation after our chat and learns and be able to just talk about all of them because they were fantastic questions. We will be answering all of our questions that were topic related and try to focus on hitting all of those. So anytime you have a question that maybe not directly related to our topic, most of our questions we got, the good news is with those, they were either past chat and learns, which we are in the process of uploading all of those past live streams to our leadership website. They're also archived on our social medias, so you can go back and watch them. Or they're topics that's coming up in the next few months. So know that we will make sure your questions are answered. Just keep coming back. So let's dive right in, right? Let's start having this conversation. Interviews, we've all had them. We've all had to be a part of them. It's a process. There's different ways to approach it. So let's start high level. We're going to go high level. We're going to dig in because we have a lot of very specific questions. But at a very high level, why is it important to make sure that you find the right person for the job?
Yeah, I think it boils down to it really makes your job easier as leadership. I say that I am only as good as my team. So if they fail, I fail. And I think we end up spending a lot more time on folks if they aren't the right fit for a position. And, here in Chesterfield, we really try to prioritize internal candidates for promotions. But sometimes for specialized positions, we really do have to look at those external folks and bring them in to give us a new perspective to kind of take us from good to great. But to answer your question, I really think it's just to simply make sure people are happy in their roles because it's the right fit for them. And then also to make our jobs easier, which then makes it easier to feed the kids.
Yeah, and Danielle, that's a really good question because most of us, once we get into our jobs, they are like families. Like everyone that we work with, they become family to us. So I think just making sure that when you have someone that can come in and help you elevate what you're already doing and bring in new ideas and new, just a new way of thinking to what you're already doing. And I think that's why it's important. You want somebody that can mesh with your team, but also say, hey, I know we're doing this, but let's see if we could even make this even better.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have two very interesting light bulb moments during both of what you said. The difference between good and great. That sounds super simple, but that alone will make a difference in how your team functions, not only from the leadership perspective, but with the people you work with every day. And we talked a little bit before we went live and just it might be the right person for the department, but it might not be the right position. And it's so important that we take the time, and that's what you do in the interview, is you try to really get a feel for what this person's skills are. And sometimes that's really easy. Sometimes it's not, because we've briefly kind of talked about how personalities and communication can come into play, and you've got introverts and extroverts, and some people are really easy to talk to in interviews and they're not nervous at all. They're not thinking about it. But then you do got to think some people are just more reserved, and they may have a great skill set and they're just not great at communicating it to you. So we've got to make sure that we start asking the questions that's going to help us figure out the skills that they may not be so great at telling us about. And so let's start there. We're gonna talk again high level questions, and then we're gonna get into some very specific examples we have on how you would ask some questions. But Casey, I know you talked about y'all are currently and have just kind of revamped your interview process. So kind of walk us through how you determined what questions you ask in interviews right now.
Yeah, so when I started here 2 years ago, a lot of our questions were technical skill and experience based, which are really great questions to start with, particularly with candidates that are familiar with our field, because I think it builds a comfort level for them and they're like, oh yeah, I got this. And then you kind of throw in the more challenging questions later and they're already in that confidence groove to keep flowing through the interview. But what I started to ask myself and my team is, if a candidate doesn't know what offer versus serve is that going to prevent me from hiring them? And generally the answer is no, that wouldn't prevent me from hiring them, because I have a team that could teach offer versus serve, overnight. And so I don't necessarily need a candidate to know offer versus serve. And does it help short term that they know offer versus serve? Sure, it does. And it means I'll have to spend a little less time transitioning that employee into our department. But when I think about long-term stability in the field and in our central office, I'm really looking for more soft skills. So problem solving. Do they have compassion? Do they have communication skills? Do they have the ability to actively listen? Because those are the things that, sure, you can train them, but it takes a lot longer to train those types of skills with individuals. And so those are the things I really want to pop out in our interview and set people, to that next level of candidate. And so we now ask a lot more just open-ended questions, problem solving, try to generate some conversation, conflict management. I think a lot of people always ask the question, what's your greatest weakness? But I think everyone's so used to that question that it's a canned response. You're not getting a candid answer. And so I think if you gear questions more towards, tell me about a time that you didn't agree with your manager and how did you communicate that? And did you resolve it? Or is there anything you learned from that situation? Because sometimes the answers to the question aren't the ones that it wasn't the best way to handle it in that moment, but did that person learn from that experience? And do I think they have the potential to grow from that? So that was kind of long, but I think it's moving away from those technical questions. And I'm saying still ask them, but start to add in some of those behavioral questions. And if folks aren't familiar with what behavioral questions are, just Google it, and you don't even have to reinvent the wheel. I'm sure the Google world has plenty of behavioral questions that align with your core values.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point to just have some general questions. And then also, what is the job you're hiring for? Because if you're hiring for a manager, you're not going to ask the same questions that you would hire for a school nutrition staff employee. So the questions would differ depending on who you're hiring. So I think that's a good point of just looking at your questions and who are you interviewing, and do those questions fit that interview?
Yeah, and situation-based questions. I love that because that's something, my various roles I've realized and kind of watched the progression to those interviews. And like you said, you can tell so much more from how a person answers in the, all right, this is what happened, because you can tell those soft skills come into play. You're able to really dig. And usually they lead to follow-up questions. And so I do, because you said Google, you're right. We can find a lot of things on Google. One of our related questions today asks if you are aware of where to find some simple math assessment tools that are appropriate for school food service. So if you want to talk just a second about any specific resources that you would like to share and know that are great that you've used, do that, and then we'll jump back into asking more specific questions.
Yeah, we don't necessarily do any math assessments here, but I know ICN has some basic math courses for managers. And so I'm sure there's simple equations within that training resource that could be pulled out for a simple math assessment. The only one we use right now is for our food service associates, and it is based on the amount of change they would give back to a customer. But realistically, again, our point of sale system does that for them. So at the end of the day, again, that's one of those questions that I kind of questioned to myself. If they got the math wrong on that, would it be a deal breaker for me? And I'm not sure, because we use a electronic system that really does the math for them. So I don't have a great answer, but like I said, ICN, not being sponsored, is always a great resource.
That was also not planned or asked for. I'd like to put in that disclaimer. But yeah, no, I appreciate that answer. And I think you did answer it. And I think it was a great answer. And it goes back to, yeah, you got to really, we're spending time now to figure out what questions to ask. And I think that probably is a legitimate time. Do I need to ask this? Do I not? Well, I think you answered it great. Okay, so I'm going to dive in some specific questions, and we're going to keep the ball rolling. And so let's start with this person, because we don't have names. So, we're not singling anybody out, but they're from a small town in a rural area. Applicants sometimes have zero experience working with food. What are the best questions to ask these candidates?
Yeah, I think that goes back to really what I was talking about, those behavioral questions. I think there was a time that none of us had food service experience, and someone took a chance on us, and look at us now, woo, doing a live stream on interviews. But I think it's about asking questions that put more emphasis on their ability to learn, their communication skills, and how they handle adversity. And a lot of people that aren't in the school nutrition world, they don't realize how fast paced our world is. And so really just gauging their ability to work in a fast-paced environment. I do feel that some people that aren't familiar get a bit like deer in headlights when they step foot in one, in our kitchens, and like, oh, wow, this is hard. Yeah, I mean, it is. And so I think just gauging their ability to adapt in that type of situation will definitely serve you in the long run.
And before I get to my answer, going back to what Casey said earlier about our basic culinary math course, you can actually find that on theicn.org. And there are some flashcards that you can look at if you would like to use those. Those aren't an assessment, but there are some flashcards. So thank you, Casey, for mentioning that. I think with this question, it was tricky because I'm unsure of what questions you would ask if they have zero experience. However, maybe that's a time for you to update your policies, and maybe within so many months of employment, you have a certain course that you want them to take. Maybe it's food safety. Maybe there's something that you would like them to do if they have zero food experience. And maybe you take it as far as you have them working another position in that school that doesn't relate to food until you get them trained. So maybe if they've got experience on the cash register, maybe have them work the POS system or the point of sale until you can get them familiarized with working with food.
And no, I was just say, if I may, just thinking on it more, there have been times where, I interview candidates that have worked in other school divisions, and on resumes, they're great. And, I'm like, yes, they're going to hit the ground running. I'm so excited. This is going to be so easy for us. And then unfortunately, they don't fit our culture and they don't adapt to our environment. And, whether that results in disciplinary or turnover, sometimes I find that a fresh new face, and again, someone with a different perspective that can bring new ideas in a different way, is almost a benefit to our environment.
Yeah, and it goes back to what we've alluded to, and you got to find the right person for the right position, in hard skills versus soft skills. And sometimes those soft skills are more important than the hard skills because you can train. Like, part of what we're doing here is trying to just elevate that conversation of empowering your people, and that includes training.
Absolutely.
So, like Patrick said, finding the courses, the trainings you need to build people up. Sometimes I've had situations, those are the best employees. They may not necessarily seem like the ideal fit on paper when you look at them, but like I look at now and I'm like, I am so proud because, like, for whatever reason in that interview, I was like, you know what? This person's got it. And so it goes back to finding the right question. And so this is another soft skill related question that I would love to hear. If you have a question that you currently use, or let's talk through, we'll make up one. So it's asking for a type of probing question, which I love the way that our submitter worded that. Because, we want those open-ended probing questions. So we're looking for a type of probing question that would give the interviewer an idea about the applicant's commitment to the job and the individual's long-term resilience. What a question.
I know, no, that one, I was like, I had to think about it. But I think it's okay to flat out ask someone, why did you apply for this specific position and what are your long-term career goals? I think that will, for the most part, pull it out, or you'll get an intuitive feeling on their response. Is it just a canned response that you want to hear, or do you feel that the candidate put some thought into it? And again, does it align with your core values and your goals set for your department? But I think that, to me, that's the question to ask, just dive right into it.
Yeah, I think my question that I came up with was, if you were hired for this position, where do you see yourself within the next 3 to 5 years? Like, where do you see yourself in this position? Because things change and times change. So if you were hired, what would you be doing?
Yeah. So we did not know the answer ahead of time. If anybody's ever wondering, we do submit our guests ahead of time so they can also prepare. But yeah, both of you, that's fantastic.
And And Danielle, sorry, I don't mean to I keep thinking, I'm like, what else?
Oh,
And I don't think, like, let's say a candidate responds that this may be a stepping stone in some way. Like, I'm applying for a manager position, but long term, I want to be a director of school nutrition. Like, I don't think that's necessarily a bad response. I think that's a truthful and an honest response. And it's someone that's passionate about this field. And so they're going to give this their all and they're going to learn about it. And so just because someone may not give you longevity doesn't mean that they won't be dedicated and committed to your organization. And so also building a culture within your team, that a growth mindset of that you're advocating and you're supporting your team, whether that means they grow within your organization or they move on. But because I think committing that way, it allows your team to commit back to you and to trust that you're really looking out for them in a professional sense. So longevity is great. Commitment and passion about this line of work, I think, is much more important.
yeah, interrupt me anytime you want. That was great. And that goes back to, this is another plug we want to make about our goal with our leadership series and these chat and learns here at ICN. We really believe that a leader is anyone on the team. You do not have to be in management. You do not have to be in a leadership position to be able to, we talk about our 3 E's. These are our words that we love. We want to empower, elevate, and educate. And like you're saying, that growth mindset, that commitment to what is best for your team and what's best for your people. At the end of the day, like, that's truly how you do get the right people, is they feel appreciated and they feel supported. Okay, so we do this every time. We're gonna keep track. We may go a few minutes over our normal 30 minutes because we have questions that we've not got to that we are going to get to. But again, this is why we're going to figure out a way to continue the conversation with y'all. This is great. I wouldn't change it at all. But that means we need to do a little rapid fire too. So I want to talk about one question that asks, because I think it is important. In this tight labor market, what are some of the basic qualifications that you cannot live without?
Again, I mean, I feel like I'm harping on it, but soft skills, are they professional in their approach? Compassion's really big to me right now. Is this person kind? Like, and I'm like, such a lost skill. Like, can this person show compassion towards other people? And do they have the ability to adapt in our world that seems to be ever changing? Those to me are really non-negotiables.
Yeah, I would say, you can really teach anyone about school nutrition. Like, you can teach them what you need them to know. But kind of, as Casey said, you want them to be passionate, like willing to do the work and be excited about coming in and doing the work. I'm also willing to learn because, as Casey said, it's always changing. Things are always happening. So willing to learn and adapt and work with your team. And that's my other, is being a team player. You want someone that's willing to work with others and listen to new ideas.
And this is a follow-up. I didn't mean for this to be a follow-up question, but this works very well. And so the question, I'm going to read it as it's worded, and then we may, if y'all aren't following who I think they're connected, I'll help. We'll get there. But so thinking about the trends that are currently there to boost employee morale and productivity, how can this information be designed into interview questions?
Yeah, I think a lot of us go into the mindset that people are motivated by money, and the current trends are showing that money is really secondary to how people feel. If they feel supported, if they feel appreciated, if there's appropriate work-life balance. And so I think asking people in an interview setting, if you're trying to figure out how they are motivated to be productive, is asking them, what motivates you? And I think they're going to either give you an answer that tells you it's money-based, that it's intrinsic, or it's an extrinsic factor. And then if it's the reverse, if you want to know how this individual would motivate employees, I think you can just ask about a time that they boosted morale or they did something, a project that helped with productivity. But I think it's kind of two-pronged. It depends on what, I guess, vision or that you're coming in from.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer because we've actually, in our past live streams, we've mentioned morale and productivity. That's a hard word to say. And so what most of, the responses was to listen to your employees, to get feedback from them and hear what they need from you and what you can do to support them. And, it's just as simple as saying, hey, how are you doing? What can I do to help you grow in your job? And I think that's really what people want to hear, just how can we help you succeed?
Yeah, change is hard, but we know that it's inevitable. We're going to deal with it every single day in various forms. And I think that's what's important. Like you said, the support. All right. So we have like a minute.
Okay.
I have 5 questions that I am going to ask Casey. So I want you to be ready.
Okay.
We're going to wrap this out, roll rapid fire, and just end it on a strong note. Okay. Okay. So how can you go from a worker to a leader of the same people?
I think it's really challenging, but that doesn't make it impossible. A lot of people do it, and a lot of people do it well. I think if you treat people with respect and professionalism, and again, that compassion and kindness, and that you're consistent to everyone, when you build that kind of level of mutual respect prior to going into this new leadership role, then because there's already that level of respect, there won't be much conflict in my personal experience. And there'll be times I think you have to have hard conversations with people that used to be your peers. But if you stick to policy and procedure and it's not personal, it's business, again, respectful and professional, the transition can be pretty seamless.
Yeah, I've actually lived through this. So I agree with you, Casey. It's all about respect. When I started, I was working at a school and then I left and I came back as their manager. And it was hard because most of them had been working 5, 10 plus years with the previous manager. So it's, why are you asking me to make these changes? And why are you asking me to do these things? So it's all back to, okay, well, tell me why you're so hesitant and what can we do to make it work?
Just being a person yourself, realizing, we've got to have grace. And like you said, just be kind. Sometimes it gets down to that. Why is leadership hard?
I'm still trying to figure it out. But it would be a great world if we were all great leaders. And, in my opinion, I think it's so hard because we all just tick so differently. And what motivates you or me or you or Danielle or Patrick, I'm sure there are 3 different things. And as leaders, we have to recognize that as individuals. And sometimes that requires us as individuals to adapt to that and mold ourselves, of course, staying within the boundaries of our own values. But sometimes we have to adapt who we are to meet people where they are. And that's really hard. Sometimes it's very hard. But it's a learning process. And sometimes I think it's about taking accountability when things don't go right. And it's okay to say, hey, yeah, I goofed on that one. But I'm going to be better in X, Y, and Z way, and learn. So definitely a learning process.
Yeah, and to add to that, to me, I don't think leadership is hard. I believe it's an opportunity. And as we've said so many times, that leadership is the process of guiding a team towards a goal. So it's just working with that team and trying to help them reach that goal. Will it be easy? No, but it takes time, as with anything.
Yeah, and I think it's hard because no one likes to be uncomfortable. And you're going to be uncomfortable in some way, shape, form, or fashion. You're going to put yourself in a situation and you're like, I don't really like that I'm here. And you at that moment, you either decide to learn from it, power through it, or not. And to me, that was my answer. The more I thought about it, I was like, it's just nobody wants to be uncomfortable. And it
That's
gets
such a good
uncomfortable.
way of looking at it.
Yep.
Leadership is so uncomfortable. Particularly, I'm an introvert. Leadership is very uncomfortable as an introvert. But introverts can do it too.
There you go. I love that. All right. So another very general question. So we got 3 more to go, and they're all kind of related. But if you had to give just this generic advice, we're going to get specific here in a second.
Okay.
How do you be a good leader?
I think again, just show up, recognizing it's a learning process. Again, taking accountability when you weren't your best self, or when you're growing. I think it's okay to admit, like, I'm not great here and I'm really working on this, and receiving feedback when it's given, in a listening way. But I went to Virginia Tech, and at Virginia Tech, they had a leadership course. So I've had a lot of classes kind of on this leadership topic, but if you're not familiar with the term emotional intelligence, I highly recommend like doing some research on it, looking into self-awareness, do some personality tests. I think that's a really good place to start, is learning about yourself and what you bring to the table, and again, some areas of growth. Just recognizing where you can start, and then once you're strong in that area, you can start worrying about social awareness and how those work in congruence. But I always recommend, if someone's unsure where to start, it's kind of easy, because the best place to start is with yourself.
Yeah, I would say listen to your staff, listen to those around you, and just do your best. That's all you can do.
Yeah. Just that worked out very well, because that was going to be I was going to summarize of saying, why is leadership hard? It's uncomfortable. How do you be a good leader? You're willing to put in the work to better yourself and be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so last 2 questions, these are our ending questions now from last month, before we decided we're going to pull these in, and ask every single person.
Okay.
So I want you to think over your career, Casey. What would you consider your greatest accomplishment? Apparently, we're going to have really hard words today. Greatest accomplishment in regards to interviewing.
It's interesting. I always prepare for interviews, and everyone always thinks that as soon as a question's asked, you need an immediate response. Like, you can't think about it. The panel wants you to just know the answer. And I've gotten really good at being comfortable, at being silent, and really thinking about a question before I respond to it. And silence can make people really uncomfortable. And so it seems so little, but building some confidence and just thinking through my thoughts before I feel the need to speak has been really big for me.
Fantastic. I love this. And so, final question. If you can think back to Casey at her very beginning stage of her career, what leadership advice would you give yourself?
Oh man, probably show myself some grace. Particularly, coming out of college, I can remember being at the end of my unpaid internship, and sobbing because I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. And, and things just kind of worked out. And, my first job with child nutrition, I mean, I earned it, but it kind of fell in my lap, and it's just built from here. But I was so hard on myself coming into my first job. And I think through this process, if I had told myself it was okay to fail, but you just have to, pick yourself up by the bootstraps and try again and try to be better next time. And that would make me stronger. I think I probably would have been a lot less anxious in those days.
Well, that is excellent advice. And I thank you so much for sharing that with us and for talking with us today. I hope that all of our audience enjoyed it, and that you will continue to join us each month. So next month, we are meeting on the 16th of March, again at 3:30, or at 3 Central, 4 Eastern, and then our different time zones. And we cannot wait to have you here next time. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.